Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is SlammerIV. Very excited to bring you another Littlewargame match today. Today we're going to be watching Rerks in the bottom right, in the blue, facing off against NorM in the top left, in the red. These two players are going to be playing on the map Ravaged, one of the more standard and played maps in Littlewargame. Possibly the most played map ever in Littlewargame, I would say. And these two guys are both, I would say, in the top 8 to 10 players in Littlewargame. These are some very high-level players here, so I'm excited to see them face off and to see who comes out the victor today. It's going to be a Beast versus Rerks game. Rerks is going for a 1-den expand, bit of an old school opening, and NorM is playing that really normal standard 1 Rerks expand that is such bread and butter. Actually, excuse me, I thought Rerks was going for 1-den. It's actually a 2-den. This is more in line with the modern way to play Beast. Kind of that 2-den or castle first expand are kind of the two options that I think are the best for Beast. And that's kind of what Rerks is going for here. In general, I find this is a pretty advantageous build for Rerks. I think 1 Rerks versus 2-den is quite favored for the Rerks player. The Rerks has to micro very well in order to make sure they maintain their advantage. And I think if Beast plays maybe perfectly, they can equalize at best. But in general, this should be pretty excellent for the Rerks player. Now, the next thing to pay attention to here is how many raiders. Oh, what is going on here? That is interesting. Okay, NorM going for a second house before castle. That's a really interesting choice. I think I'm not 100% sure why he would do that. He may just be going for triple raider here. But really, I think it's better to get the castle first in general than anything else. Meanwhile, what I was going to say is oftentimes you only get a single raider before you get your castle expand out. Sometimes you can go up to 3 raiders, go 2 raiders. There's really different flavors. So far, I like what Rerks is doing here. One thing to note is Rerks himself is going for a 3rd house, so there's different variations for 2-den as well. You can go for the 2 house, or you can go for the 3 house. This is a 3 house variation from Rerks, which means he's going to build a lot of units. Now that I think about it, I believe NorM is going for the house because he's identified that it's a 2-den. So he's just getting that house because he knows he wants to get more Rerks units out before he actually attacks in. And so that's kind of his desire there. Nice micro from Rerks there. Rerks gets a raider kill, which is huge, and gets good damage off on the archer. NorM here is not even building any more barracks units. It makes sense. He wants to get that castle out as soon as possible, and since he has the tower, he is completely safe to the wolves of Rerks. And Rerks kind of identifying that once the tower is up, it's time to expand, decides to go ahead and get that castle up. Through all of this, the worker counts are 14 to 12, an advantage for NorM there. However, that's a pretty minor, well, actually, it's only 15 to 12, fairly solid advantage for NorM. And the castle timings are pretty much identical. But really, overall, we end up being at a fairly even game, all things considered. About a 2.5 worker advantage, roughly, for NorM here. But Rerks may be able to kind of make up at least half a worker to a worker with his faster castle timing in general. And if we look at the income, we can see it's pretty much dead even, with a little bit more loss for NorM because NorM has traded 2 raiders for 2 wolves. So in general, I would say Rerks has been microing and controlling his wolves a little bit better than NorM has been controlling his raiders in this engagement. And we just see the wolf dens now coming out. And just a 3rd wolf den. third wolf den's an interesting choice. Really, Beast at this point is now making some pretty hard tech choices. You can go for 2 castle lair. You can go for 5 den, like all in, to try to kill a third base. Or you can go for your own third base. In general, I'm a little bit surprised to see the third den unless he adds on 4 and 5 and goes really ham on the wolf snake off 2 base. Just because I feel like it's better to get the third base and then add your 4th, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 5th den after your third base. But we'll see what Rerks decides to do. Meanwhile, Norm is just really content to stay on his bases. He still has that about 2 worker advantage from the early game, so he's going to kind of continue to lean on that. Meanwhile, he's just going to continue to macro out. Interesting that he's choosing raiders. Looks like he's getting a couple raiders to go along with his main archer force and just kind of using the archers to kite forward and backwards a little bit and do a little bit of damage. Yeah, it looks like it might be a 5 den after all from Rerks. He's adding that 4th den on. He's got his snake charmer. So as he can afford stuff, he's just continuing to add on them the tech structures, and he's definitely going to be massing a large army here, which is interesting because I think Norm probably is going to be more content to just secure a third base. You can kind of see that with his worker here, but he doesn't really have the army yet to take that third base, I don't think. Particularly with these raiders kind of going on a counterattack mission. It's going to force Norm to pull back and kind of fall back to his tower, and he's going to lose that worker, which is a nice pickoff for Rerks. Meanwhile, Rerks is just continuing to macro up these 4 den. He can't quite afford the 5th den yet. I think he'll be getting that in a second. But he's also kind of filling in his worker count, so you can definitely you can utilize 2 to 3 more workers. And he is going to have a couple raiders hitting his main base. Maybe he'll lose it. It'll be interesting if Norm decides to like cut off reinforcements with these raiders. Looks like right now he's just keeping an eye out for that third base. He's expecting a third base here. Bit of a macro misplay coming from Norm here. He's floating a lot of money. I think it's just because he mainly wants to grab that castle. But with only 2 barracks, he's not really producing as much units as he should be probably at this position. It's interesting. He's kind of identified that there's a large amount of units. Maybe with his raiders, he's identifying that it's going to be well, because his raiders scout no third base, right? So Norm has identified it's going to be a 2-base push. And his raiders definitely confirm it here. And as a result, he kind of throws down the church and the 3rd barracks. I would kind of like him to go straight away for a tower here at the 3rd base, I think. Could be good. But in general, there's no 3rd base for Rerks to attack, so Norm can really sit comfortably on his 2 bases for now. And I think that may force Rerks to transition himself. We do see an advanced workshop coming out, which is an interesting choice from Rerks. I wonder if he's going to go for some sort of drop play behind. Or if he's going to go for his own 3rd base. I think if I were playing in this situation, knowing that the barracks player has kind of bunkered up pretty comfortably on 2 base, I would probably go ahead and be wanting to get that 3rd base, which I think Rerks is doing here now as he sends the worker over into that position. These raiders have been just kind of running around. They haven't really achieved anything, but they've kept Norm pretty aware of where his opponent is and kept Rerks fairly busy, which is kind of nice. But now they're going to have to run away and die. Norm has to be a little bit careful. He's kind of sitting pretty exposed here. I'd probably wait. Now that he's invested in the church, I think he needs to wait for at least a priest to come out, which he does. So now he's going to use the priest to heal his units up and make it a little bit harder for this wolf snake force to engage into him. Supplies are quite a bit in favor of Rerks, about 25 supply in favor. However, wolf snake is a very supply inefficient force. Forces you to make a lot of houses to produce that amount of wolf snake. So in general, Norm's army is probably a little bit stronger than Rerks' army at the moment if they fight head on.
Are you writing?
So now we have an engagement coming in here. Rerks surrounding the soldiers, picks a couple of them off with some good wolf snake micro. Norm was forced to kind of back up with his forces, and now you find Norm is really hurting to get that 3rd base. He's going to start running low on gold here, and his income is just not going to be good enough as Rerks is just now securing his own third base. So it's kind of this is really the timing where Norm has to be moving out and taking a position here. He's aware that this army is lurking, so he's very loath to move his units out of this position here. Finally, the castle there does go down, and that kind of triggers Rerks to go for the push. But he does have his priest in position to heal, and his soldiers on the front line are staying alive fairly well, and a lot of the wolf snake is getting killed here. I think it looks like Norm is actually going to trade fairly decently here. Look at these soldiers tanking away hard in the middle of the fight. Norm is even pulling a couple workers, because I mean he's got so many workers. Actually, he's at 31 workers, so he doesn't really need to have that many working on his mine. And he does finally clean up this wolf snake. And I think this is the point in the game where Rerks needs to think about transitioning and adding his tech. And you can see that he's actually doing that. He's adding his fortress on here, so he's going to go for the dragons. But this force of soldiers and archers from Norm is really deadly and much stronger than the force that Rerks is working with at the moment. So it looks like Norm may actually decide to push across the map, which is pretty scary for Rerks because all he has is wolf snake. He has no other tech, no werewolves, no dragons, not even any really upgrades. He's up against +1 armor Rerks units right now, and these wolf snake troops are going to have big time trouble, particularly the snakes, at dealing with these soldiers and archers with the +1 armor on them. So this is really an important engagement here. Rerks is desperately trying to get his forces in play. He's got a tower helping out, and it looks like he's finally going to break through the meat shield of soldiers that Norm has. But these archers are just continually getting healed up into this healing aura, and they all have +1 armor. So it's really hard for these wolf snake forces to break through. Rerks is just desperately trying to throw down extra den and extra towers to defend here, and it looks like Norm has decided that it's time to kind of pull back and reconsider this engagement. I kind of wish he had attacked the third base, or the natural base, because these snakes are really not going to do that well, I feel like, against the forces of Norm. And Norm is just going to continue to put pressure on now. He's finally getting his expansion saturated. I really hope Norm fixes his worker saturations because, and look, there he does it, just as I say it. So he's going to finally get his third base up and running, and Rerks is now going to try to transition towards those werewolves. However, he's going to be a little bit in trouble because there's so many soldiers and priests here that it's going to be so hard for this wolf snake, which is just insufficient units, to actually deal with this force. Snakes going down, soldiers pushing in, and this is really, really bad for Rerks. I think this may be GG here. The wolf snake is just not strong enough at this point to deal with this force that's wedged itself right into the middle of the base here, doing good damage to everything around it. Rerks is desperately throwing down towers, but look at these +2 armor units against only +1 attack are just so tough to deal with. These soldiers working with their +1 base armor have 4 armor up against only a +8 attack, so they're only taking 4 damage to snakes. Finally, Rerks does have his werewolf den out. He's getting a couple werewolves, but I think it's going to be way too little, way too late here, as these archers are just working their way through every single structure that Rerks has. He's going to need more than 1 or 2 werewolves to deal with this kind of army, as more soldiers and priests continue to stream across the map. Norm has even taken his 4th base at this point, while Rerks' main base mines out. So really, Rerks is out of money and out of any hope. He only has these 2 werewolves to work with, and that's not going to be enough to deal with this massive force of Norm. You're going to see this werewolf get focused down so quickly by these archers that there's really no hope. And there it goes. It dies, and that is going to be G to the G. Well played by Norm here, playing a very calm, collected Rerks style, not rushing anything at all, and just overwhelming his opponent here. I think Rerks played a little bit too passively in his tech choices, needed to get up to either dragons or werewolves far, far, far sooner than he did. And in the end, that basically caused him to have to tap out of this game. Really well played by Norm to win this one. And it's kind of just a matter of waiting for Rerks to realize he has no units and no money left. It will take a lot of wolf snake to deal with that force that NorM has accomplished. So really fun game between these two players. I'm glad that they were able to save this replay and I was able to get my hands on it. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you all next time.